We're live.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 12 of the Nerd List. Happy New Year's, everybody. And this is the first Nerd List of 2019. And we are doing the best directors of all time list. I have a stacked panel tonight, starting with Jeremy Adams. How's it going, brother?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here. I haven't been on a show like this in quite a while. And since we're on a slight break from Full Metal, where I hail from, I have a little time to do cool things like this. So I'm really excited.
Yep, of course. So welcome back. And of course, we have Malcolm Goldie Lay. How's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. I've got a small selection, but a lot of my others will probably come up anyway. So.
And of course, we have Luca returning. How's it going, man?
Yeah, I mean, I still haven't found my body from last episode, so you're gonna have to spend a little bit more time without looking at my beautiful self, because I'm still just trying to find it. I don't know where I've left it, and I'm just a voice in the web, as it were, now.
Did you lose your shadow too, Peter Pan style?
I lost my shadow, and then I lost the rest of me, and it was just like, oh, this is not how that's supposed to go.
This is nothing. All right, everybody. So this is how the Nerd List works. We have a nomination process up to 10 directors. Then we eliminate 3 of them, knock it down to the top 7, and then we rank 7 to 1. So let's start with Jeremy with his first nomination.
Oh, okay. Thank you for the honor of going first. I'm going to go with a pick that's pretty personal to me, because I think this is one of the first filmmakers that I saw as a child that really alerted me to the fact that a director is a thing, that a director's name is on the movie, that he can be the creative engine behind the movie, and that you can watch their movies and know who that person is and know their voice. And that person, who I've been watching his films all my life, is Alfred Hitchcock. I'm sure a lot of people know his name. He's known as the master of suspense. But to me, his movies spanned a lot of different genres. There were like spy films. He did, some war-themed films. And then, of course, he did thrillers, suspense films, mystery. And if you go all the way back to the silent era and track his career through the 30s to the 40s, all the way to the 70s when he's doing an R-rated movie like Frenzy, it's amazing to see that journey. And I just think that of a lot of the classic influential directors that we know, Hitchcock's films, I think, really hold up better than a lot. And you can watch so many of his films still and be just as enthralled and entertained. And you can see the influence, not just in thrillers and films like that, but in directing and filmmaking in general. And my personal favorites are films like Shadow of a Doubt, Notorious, Strangers on a Train, of course, Rear Window, Vertigo, North by Northwest, Psycho. But there's so many. Some of the deeper cuts, like the 39 Steps and Saboteur, are great films. It's an amazing career. And so that is my first nomination, Alfred Hitchcock.
All right. Alfred Hitchcock. Let's start with Luca.
Yeah, I think that when you have a director who puts in literally, his first film is a short film that was released in 1922. His last film was Family Plot in 1976. And when you have someone who has a career of that expansive, going from silent to black and white sound to color film, and even going back into black and white film for certain points, like just as a stylistic perspective, being one of the few people to exist within the Hollywood system and really be able to be defined as an auteur, but also someone who is incredibly malleable stylistically and whose influence has been felt in, he's in slashers from Psycho, he's in spy thrillers from North by Northwest, he's in psychological thrillers from movies like Spellbound, which, by the way, is my favorite Hitchcock film. I think it's great. Absolutely incredible film, beautifully designed. One of my favorite Gregory Peck performances. He's a director who I think is both very accessible to casual film viewers, film fans, people who like, almost popcorn movies in a way, but also someone who you can study as a film student, someone who you can get a sense of, why has this person decided to put these bits into the script? Why has this person decided to place the camera here? Why is this person who has this very intricate control over the whole film can sort of give you a big picture of that auteur process. He's an incredibly influential director. He's an incredibly virtuosic director. He's incredibly proficient, and I'm going to give him a big, huge yes.
Thank you.
All right, one yes. Malcolm, Alfred Hitchcock.
I mean, I haven't seen a lot of his movies, but what I have seen, I really like. This is one that, it's like all the ones I've seen is like really good. Like Psycho, North by Northeast, Vertigo, The Birds. I mean, it's definitely, and his way of filmmaking, it works. So I mean, it's definitely a hell yes for me. And fun fact, North by Northwest is turning 60 years old this year.
It is.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, so Alfred Hitchcock is the first one to make it on the list. I would have given it a yes also. I love a lot of his movies, and as everyone else said, very influential in his style of filmmaking. All right, so let's go on to me. I'm going to go with one that, in my opinion, is one of the best comedy directors of all time, and I'm going Mel Brooks. And when you look at the movies that he has made, including Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, my personal favorite, Spaceballs, Robin Hood, Men in Tights. I mean, the dude just understands what makes comedies interesting and unique and funny, and each of his movies don't feel the same, which is really important in a director, is to always add subtle changes to their comedy or their horror or whatever, make it different, but also make it feel like I know this is a Mel Brooks film because of the style, of the way the dialogue works. Just every one of his movies I watch, I laugh and enjoy myself and constantly entertained by a lot of his parody comedy movies. So I'm going Mel Brooks as my first nomination. Malcolm.
Yeah, that's a big yes for me. Like, I really love the Spaceballs, Blazing Saddles, and all that. Like, he has a tendency to take sort of what is popular at the times, like, how can I twist it and turn it into a satire? And he does it so well. And I mean, like, one of my favorite moments is when he did the whole Alien parody in space. Was like John, who was just like, "Oh no, not again!" Just so matter of factly. It's like, so it's definitely a hell yes.
All right, Luca.
Okay, so I like Mel Brooks. He's a funny director. I love Young Frankenstein. I love Blazing Saddles. He's got a great underrated film from 1970 called The 12 Chairs, which is
great.
Did we lose Luca?
For a second?
Did you lose me?
Yeah, we didn't hear you for a second.
You're
back.
So the thing is, like, once you get past a certain point and you get to, I think Silent Movie is quite good, and I think High Anxiety is pretty good. Yeah. But for me, once you get to History of the World Part 1, it kind of starts to take a downturn. And then that sort of sequence of 4 movies after, Spaceballs, which I don't think is good, Life Stinks, which is awful, Robin Hood Men in Tights, which is okay, and his final and horrendous Dracula Dead and Loving It, which, oh boy, is very, very bad. You get to realize that you're talking about a director who has a 50% success rate at that point. And I just, as funny as his movies are at their best, and as smart as he is, honestly, like, recently I've had more of an enjoyable time watching Zucker Brothers movies. So while very, very influential, and the producers and Young Frankenstein are 2 of my favorite movies ever, Blazing Saddles is up there too, it's just not consistent enough for me, so I'm going to give it a no.
I completely understand. And Jeremy.
I can't say I agree with all of Luca's points. I personally do love Spaceballs, and the scene that you were talking about, Malcolm, with the alien spoof. I actually remember that was the first time I ever, my parents let me watch a lot of movies I shouldn't have watched as a kid, so I had actually seen Alien, and I was like 6 or 7. And when I watched that scene, that was like the first time that I saw something, recognized what the reference was. I knew they were spoofing the One Froggy Evening cartoon, the Warner Brothers cartoon too, and I knew all these references, and it hit me so hard I actually remember falling out of my chair laughing. And I think that's like the first time I ever did that. So Spaceballs will always be close to me for that. And yeah, of course, yeah, he made some great comedy classics, but unfortunately, I do have to say that, you have the 60s and the 70s where I think he made some of the greatest comedies ever. And then it does, once you get to the 80s and 90s, does get a little spottier. I still really like some of those movies. Like I actually like Men in Tights a lot, but yeah, I think there are other comedy directors that have a better batting average. As like you said, as great as he is and as influential as he was, and all the other great things he's done outside of being a film director. His comedy bits and stuff. You got to love Mel Brooks, but he just doesn't quite get there for me. So I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, completely understand. So since it's a tie, he does not make it.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to Malcolm.
Yeah, the director I'm bringing up he's more of a recent one, but I think he's done enough good to get on. He's definitely close to my heart. He's a great Kiwi. I mean, he finds a way to place him into most of his movies. But I mean, he's definitely done one of my favorite movies in the MCU as well. But of course, I'm talking about Taika Waititi.
Interesting.
He's done some good, like when Hunt for the Water People, Boy, Eel versus Shark. Like that's some of my favorites, and he does a good job of showing what it's like to live in New Zealand, and bringing up that New Zealand thing and getting it out there to show the rest of it was like, hey, look, this is New Zealand. This is what it's like, and like just the voices and acting and all that. And the actors, it's a way to show good Kiwi actors and get them out because like Julian Dennison was in Hunt for the Water People, and he went on to Deadpool 2 and Dead. You've got like people like Sam Neill who's done a lot of big things over in American stuff. So Taika Waititi's on the table.
All right, Luca.
I like Taika Waititi's movies. I really do. Thor Ragnarok is one of my sort of higher ranked MCU films. I like Boy a lot. I think Hunt for the Water People is very good. I found What We Do in the Shadows pretty funny. I enjoyed it. I don't think I've ever sat in a cinema watching a Taika Waititi movie and gone, wow, I've never seen that before. Like, I've never seen something that's made me feel like that, or I've never seen something that, like, you know, a camera technique that looked like that, or I've never seen a shot that looked like that, or I've never seen, you know, a staging or a lighting setup that looked like that. While I think he's a very good director, I don't think that he brings enough new to the table, and I don't think he has enough of a legacy for me to go, yeah, sure, I can consider him to be one of the 10 or 7 greatest of all time. I think that's way out for me personally. I'm going to say no.
All right, Jeremy?
Well, I personally do love Taika Waititi's work. Every movie of his that I've seen, I really liked. I started at the beginning with Eagle versus Shark. I've seen Boy. I've seen What We Do in the Shadows, which is one of my favorite comedies of recent years. And of course, Thor Ragnarok, he hit it out of the park. But again, I asked prior to the match, are we doing like current filmmakers working today, or are we doing of all time? If we were doing current filmmakers today, I think Taika would have a really good shot of making my list. But for all time, I just don't think it's quite in that spectrum. But I think he might, you know, he could get there because I see so much promise, and I love everything that he does. So I think that's definitely a possibility one day, just not quite there yet.
All right, it's going on to me, and I just haven't seen enough of his movies to put him on the list. That's just me personally. I've only seen, I think, maybe 3. And I can't put him on the list because I haven't seen a lot of his movies yet. So, all right. So Taika Waititi does not make the list. Let's move on to Luca.
So I'm gonna build myself. I'm gonna give myself a trait, and I'm just gonna stick with it. I'm the foreign cinema guy, so I'm gonna talk about some foreign cinema. I think that when you're talking about the way that the international cinema movement sort of takes influence from classic Hollywood and then kind of feeds it back to us in a way that we go, wow, that was really cool and new and interesting. And, you know, the guy sitting behind the camera is like, aha, you did this to me, and now I'm schooling you on it. Someone who's made a variety of films in a variety of different genres is kind of most regarded for his historical works, but has also made incredible sort of kind of contemporary dramas of his time, was working right up from, I believe, the 40s into the 80s. A Japanese filmmaker, that'd be Akira Kurosawa, who has, from sort of earlier works like Ikiru Rashomon down to his later works like Ran, created just a variety of different kinds of films, from sort of dramas to sort of most famously samurai historical fairs. Very, very influenced by American Westerns and classic Hollywood, and then sort of takes that inspiration and throws it back at us in a way that we get, we get Star Wars, we get spaghetti Westerns, we get a lot of sort of, a kind of American, more recent action tropes. We get this fantastic influence that comes from us and then is thrown back at us in a way that is sort of more creative and more wild and out there than I think, we could have ever expected it. I think he's one of the most influential directors of all time on American cinema, despite not making films in the Hollywood system. So I have to go with Kurosawa because I think that his mark has been so incredibly felt on both international and Hollywood films, despite completely sort of coming from an outside perspective.
All right, Jeremy.
Oh, this is, one of the first three filmmakers I thought of. There is no director as influential, as accomplished, as just technically just reached such a level of perception as Kurosawa. Like when I was, a younger man just discovering, cinema, I was in film school and just really becoming more of an admirer of film. One of the great pleasures was discovering filmmakers such as Kurosawa, going back and watching all these great films in the 50s, 60s, 70s, different eras. And kind of like I said with Hitchcock, you watch some of Kurosawa's great works, Seven Samurai, so many others, Yojimbo, whatever it is, and it doesn't feel like an old movie. Like they feel very in the now and gripping, and you get drawn into the storytelling because his editing techniques and his cinematic techniques and everything that he used were influential, but they were they still work today. Like the pacing and everything of his films still feels kind of modern, and you watch a film like that and you're just drawn into that so much. And I think the fact that a lot of them were historical and took place in the past and things like that probably help a little bit because they don't feel dated. But in any case, they're just, I'm assuming, maybe Hunter and Malcolm haven't seen as many of these films, but I'm urging you guys, seek out some of these great Kurosawa films. I know you'll enjoy them. There are certain filmmakers, that are great that might be a little bit of a chore to kind of go back to, but this is a filmmaker really isn't. If you watch a film like Ran or the Kagemusha is one that I particularly love. Like these are engrossing, exciting films and not a chore at all. And he's absolutely at the very, very top for me.
Rashomon's a good one to start with.
Yeah, Rashomon is good to start. I think Yojimbo might be, but yeah, there's a lot. Even something like Throne of Blood. I mean,
Throne of Blood, true.
Yeah.
He's no Chantal Ackerman, that's for sure.
Hi, Malcolm.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy was like with Kurosawa, I've not seen any of his movies, but it's not because I don't want to. I'm just not a big fan of subtitled movies a lot. So I mean, it's me, but this is a case of I respect what he's done for cinema, and I actually understand the impact he's made. So I'm actually going to say yes based on the impact he made, sir.
Okay, awesome.
And I would just say, his films are so visual that I don't think the subtitle. I think you would still enjoy it even with the subtitle.
Yeah, a lot of it is about movement, really.
It's movement and sound, and he tells the story so visually.
Yeah.
Or just learn Japanese, and you won't have to read the subtitles.
Oh yeah, that too. You can always do that. It's easy.
It's so simple. But yeah, I haven't seen like any of his movies, so I'm definitely gonna check him out. But he makes the list. I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce his name. You guys want to help me out?
Akira Kurosawa.
Akira Kurosawa.
Yeah. Okay. Write that down. All right, so let's move back over to Jeremy.
Well, I am going to actually stay in Japan with another Japanese filmmaker, and I hope that Luca doesn't hate me for taking this one from him. But when I think of the greatest filmmakers, I think of somebody that can take their vision and their imagination and translate it like directly to the screen. And there's only one filmmaker that I think really has done that better than anyone else, being able to translate their own images, their own ideas, their own messages so perfectly to the film medium as Hayao Miyazaki, who is the great Japanese animation director.
Oh, that's not where I thought you were going.
Studio Ghibli. Some, people might know some of his films. That probably the biggest titles might be Spirited Away, Princess Mononoke, Ponyo. But I, discovered him, probably 15 years ago or so, and went back to some of the early films like Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind and Castle in the Sky, or Laputa, My Neighbor Totoro, Kiki's Delivery Service, and just discovering these great films, back when I don't think anime was, maybe as much in the consciousness as it is today. It was like a bolt of lightning to see art like that and to know that it had been created then in the 80s and 90s. Some of these great works of art, and to know that, unlike somebody like Walt Disney, who was a producer and had directors and filmmakers working under him to create these kind of films almost as a team. Miyazaki, though, he did have great animators and great collaborators. The composer and
Joe Hisaishi.
Joe Hisaishi, yeah, and so many great artists that he's worked with. But you really do get that this is his art. He draws a lot of the images in the films himself, which is kind of an amazing thing. And you just really know you're getting this great art directly from this man's mind. And I think he really is the greatest singular animation filmmaker that we've ever had. And just one of the first names I think of when I think of a great director, a great filmmaker.
All right, going on to me. And it's going to be a yes for me. And I actually have a story about this. While in college, I joined an anime club. So we could watch animes, talk about it, discuss it, the Japanese culture, everything like that. And we actually had a Miyazaki marathon. We went to someone's house and we watched 5 in a row. And my favorite was Spirited Away. The animation, the art, the story, everything about Spirited Away was fantastic. And you see that in every single one of his movies. He puts his heart and soul into every movie that he directs. And you can feel it. And when a director can make you feel something like that, that's definitely special. So it's a yes for me. Malcolm.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a yes for me as well. It's I've seen Spirit. I've seen House Birds of Cover. I mean, admittedly, I've seen the dubbed versions, but still,
Miyazaki dubs are pretty good.
Yeah, they're pretty good for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't saying that they aren't but I mean, it's one of those ones. Visually, it looks beautiful. I mean, it's definitely a beautiful looking piece, and it's definitely a yes for me as well. So,
all right, and Luca, what would you have said?
So when Jeremy was talking about Japanese directors, for some reason instantly the thought in my head was wow, you're really we're really going to Ozu already?
Might come up later.
But no, I'm an enormous Studio Ghibli fan, and I absolutely love Miyazaki's work. He's an incredible director. Personally speaking, because the music of his films is such an emotional thing, I tend to think of his films as being kind of defined by Miyazaki and Hisaishi together.
Yeah.
But just the visual landscapes of his movies, and there's these sort of concurrent themes of things like environmentalism, strong female protagonists. He has a huge thing for flight and technology and the relationship between technology and nature that I love. He's a great manga artist as well. He did a manga adaptation of Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind, which was this big 10-volume manga series, which is incredible.
I have a few.
And
don't have the whole volume.
No, but he's really, really phenomenal. And there are other Ghibli directors like Isao Takahata and his son Goro Miyazaki who make great movies. But in terms of consistency and who's defined the idea of Studio Ghibli, I mean, Totoro is their mascot. He's their symbol. You see him before all of the Ghibli movies now. He's an incredible influence, and I'm a huge Don Bluth fan, but realistically, I think that Hayao Miyazaki is the greatest director of animation film we've ever had.
Oh yeah, definitely. All right, so back over to me. I'm gonna go with the obvious choice, at least for me, and I'm going Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, we were gonna get there.
Yeah, eventually. I mean, the way that he can go from a drama to a biopic to an action film to a horror movie and make them all unique and different, but always make them great in terms of his big blockbuster movies and also his smaller, like dramas like Schindler's List and,
Would not describe that movie as small, but go ahead.
not non-blockbuster, I
Yes.
shall say. There we
His
go.
big blockbusters and his big dramas.
His big dramas. I
Exactly.
mean, just like the cast or the people he like, yeah. So someone over my work for some reason. The actors that big actors that he gets to work with him always bring their A game with when he's directing, and that shows a great director by someone who can always get the best performances out of their actors. That's what I was trying to say. There we go. So Steven Spielberg, Malcolm.
Yeah, somewhere out there, Mike Hanley is going, why is it taking them so long to get to Spielberg?
Yep.
It's definitely going to be a yes for me. It's like, and I mean, he showed just last year with Ready Player One that he still has big blockbusters in him, and he can still put out a great visually looking movie out as well. It's like he's in my eyes, he's not done anything really terrible. I don't know what his next movie is. I don't know if he's actually announced it.
I don't
but,
think he has yet,
I
but
think there is something. I'm trying to remember.
but
I'll figure it out.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be a yes for me. So
all right, Luca.
Yeah, ultimately, if you're going to look at someone who's defined popular cinema in a big way, who's defined blockbuster cinema, I would take Spielberg as my my choice for who to put there. His films are varied. His films have a consistent artistic stamp. He's given birth to some of the greatest characters in cinema, from Indiana Jones
Jurassic Park, baby.
to I don't know, the concept of a T-Rex or Ian Malcolm, maybe. I think he's made some bad movies. Munich is really bad. Always is. But he's an incredible blockbuster populist director, and therefore I will give him a yes.
All right, Jeremy, what would you have said?
I don't know that I would say Spielberg is necessarily like the best director of all time, but he is my personal favorite. When anyone ever asks me what my favorite filmmaker is, I always have to say Spielberg. And a big reason for that is that I grew up in the 80s, and the 80s were really the era of Spielberg. You couldn't be a kid then and not be touched by his films. And yeah, I think that, that what he did in the 70s and 80s with those great films like Raiders and E.T. and Close Encounters and even The Color Purple, great films that he made back then, would be enough. But he's never stopped. He continued into the 90s with Jurassic Park and Schindler's List. He's continued to make good films. One that I love is Lincoln, and I was a big fan of Ready Player One. I think he's just continued to be vital. And one of the great things about him is obviously his films are somewhat entertaining and engrossing, and there you go to see his movies to have a good time. But I think there's a lot of heart and a lot of emotion in the best of his films, and I don't know that that's true of all the directors. It's something that Spielberg does right, and I think that he's able to do it without taking it into an area that's too maudlin or too sentimental, at least in his best, and actually touch people in a way that few directors can. So of course he makes a list. He's my favorite.
All right, so Spielberg is on the list. Let's move on to Malcolm.
yeah, so looking at what's made it so far, we've got two white dudes, we've got two foreigners. We don't have
two
any
white dudes and two foreigners.
I mean, there's no sort of but
even one of the white dudes is even a foreigner, and they're all foreigners because you're from New Zealand.
Yep.
Yeah, they're all foreigners to you, Malcolm.
anyway, where I was going with that is like we don't have any women now. There hasn't been a lot of sort of women that's really shaped cinema, but I think if there is one that has to be on the list, I think Catherine Bigelow, I think, has done enough to be on here, because I mean, like with directing Point Break, she won the Academy Award for Zero Dark 30, I think. So I think
No, for Hurt Locker.
Hurt Locker, yeah.
Hurt Locker.
She did do Zero Dark 30 as well, didn't
Yes,
she?
yes,
Yes, you
absolutely.
did.
Good. I had the right movie in my head anyway. But, I mean, she's done a lot of really good movies, and I think her style, it looks good. Like, and I mean, it's one of those ones like her style's like if you asked anyone who directed Point Break, they're not going to think of Catherine Bigelow because it's one of those one that really screams. This is a white guy directed thing. So I mean, and I mean, you know what I mean. But
Yeah, we got you, man.
but it's just one of those ones like she does it in a way that you look at it like you don't think that it was a woman that directed that style because So Catherine Bigelow, I'm putting on the table.
All right, Luca.
Tricky. I think there are better female directors. Most of them are French. I think that there are. I find it tricky because I do really love my favorite one Catherine Bigelow film, which is obviously Near Dark because, of course.
Great movie, guys.
But like,
everyone see it, please.
I love Near Dark so much.
Yeah, it's so good.
And I like Point Break too. But like when it gets into the work that is like, oh, Catherine Bigelow is a serious director now, I'm just like, okay, I guess I'm out. You used to be fun, but I guess I'm done with this. So the reason I'm finding it tricky is because like she is probably the woman who has shaped how we view women directors the most, I think. But when it comes down to it, look, at the end of the day, I don't think she has enough quality films to be in top 10 of all time. That's what it comes down to for me, so I'm going to have to say no.
All right, Jeremy.
I mean, I am a big fan of Catherine Bigelow, and there's nothing I would like more than to have some great film female directors on this list. Just like Lucas said, I just don't know that the body of work is quite there. I mean, I love films like Near Dark and Point Break, even an underrated film like Strange Days. And unlike Luca, I do appreciate her more recent films like Zero Dark 30 and The Hurt Locker. But yeah, I just don't think it's quite in that upper echelon for me. A couple of those movies are great. But yeah, I wish I could get her there, but I just can't. I don't think that she's quite on the higher level. There are a couple other female directors I definitely think I could make a little better case for.
All right, so going on to me. I've seen a few of her movies, but I don't have enough knowledge about just what her style is, who she is as a director. So for me, it's going to be a no, but all right, let's move on to Luca. Yes.
Okay, so we've got two white guys and two foreigners. Let's try and get a black man on here. Wow, that. I do think that as film progresses and becomes more intersectional, we kind of have to look back and go, okay, well, how did this sort of new wave of African-American cinema come to pass? And I think that ultimately you can trace that all back to one guy, and that's Spike Lee, who is an incredible filmmaker who talks a lot about, sort of the issues of Black America and the issues of Black America going back to even before he started making films. He made a film called Four Little Girls, which is my favorite Spike Lee film, which is the incredible documentary about a Klan bombing. He even recently made a Black Klansman, which is obviously about the Klan. But like just as a filmmaker, he has such an incredible talent for creating environments and communities in his films, in things like Do the Right Thing. And oh yeah, that's the other historical Black America thing that I forgot to mention. He made Malcolm X, which is for my money the greatest biopic ever made. I'm gonna say, I'm just gonna go ahead and say that's just the best biopic ever. And he has an incredible ability to balance comedy, drama, history, socio-political issues, pop culture, style, substance. His films will make you laugh, make you cry, make you think. And he's just one of the most defining directors of sort of the second half of the 20th century and now going on into the 21st, because he's back. He had a bit of a bit of a swing down in terms of like mainstream big smash hits after not Training Day.
Inside Man.
What's
Inside Man.
Thank you. But came back in a massive way just as recently as last year, and I think he should be commended for that and for everything he's done. So thanks, Spike. Let's get you on the list.
All right, Jeremy, Spike Lee.
I actually took a class back in my college days where the entire curriculum was dedicated to the films of Martin Scorsese and Spike Lee. So I feel like I have even a little extra appreciate having, actually studied many of his films. I think that, I first saw Spike's films at a younger age in the late 80s and early 90s as they were coming out. To the Right Thing and Malcolm X I saw pretty much upon their release, and I've always loved his work. I've always been touched by it. It was always, as this kid living in a really white, life in Orange County, California, which is a particularly white place. I think those movies were really, really important for kids like me and my friends to see and to realize, these important issues and to see what the world really is like in a lot of ways beyond our own little worlds that we were living in. And pretty much my whole film watching life, his films have been important. There was a time like in the 2000s where I would argue with people that thought, he was over the top, or, he was, his movies aren't the best. They go over the top and they're annoying or whatever it was. And I've always argued, no, Spike's great. He's a great filmmaker. Nobody has hit the heights that he hit with Do the Right Thing and Malcolm X, but he's always made good films. You go all the way through his career. They're like Four Little Girls, like even something like Inside Man. There's always great films. And to see him come back with such a powerful statement with BlacKkKlansman just reminds you of the strength of this filmmaker. And he absolutely would make my list.
All right, going to me. I'm going to give it a yes. As Luca brought up, his influence on, and of course Jeremy brought this up, his influence on me personally was like, okay, this is what it's really like out there. Because I started watching Spike Lee's movies in school. They showed me Malcolm X when they probably shouldn't have in history class, but that's my
Glad
favorite.
they did.
Yeah, I'm glad they did. It's a great movie, my favorite of Spike Lee's movies, and it really opened my eyes to this stuff is still going on today, and he shows that in BlacKkKlansman, which he updates the style and still has the same message behind it, which is the real world isn't as perfect as we have in our minds, and this stuff needs to be out there and needs to be talked about, because if not, then we're all just going to live in our own bubble and not experience the real world. So it's I'm saying yes to Spike Lee. All right, Malcolm, what would you have said?
Yeah, it's definitely a yes for me too. Like I've only sort of a recent to Spike Lee, and there's been a few movies which have seen in the past and just didn't realize they were Spike Lee. But also I've got a funny story because a New Zealand newspaper caused havoc last year when Stan Lee died, and they put the wrong name in the headline and the wrong picture.
Oh, yeah.
and yeah, I mean, I don't know if Spike Lee found it funny, but it caused a lot of chaos. So yeah, that happened.
Yeah, that happened. All right, so I believe we're going on to Jeremy next.
All right, so for my next one, this is actually a Hollywood filmmaker from the classic era of Hollywood, but it's actually not a white American. This is a filmmaker that actually came over from Vienna, Austria, and made a name for himself with a very American name, making films in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and on. And I think if you look at a filmmaker whose films still resonate, you watch many of this guy's great films, they really don't age. They're still moving, funny, dramatic. He covered a wide range of genres, and this filmmaker is Billy Wilder. And I think that Billy Wilder, I still discover, because he had a very wide career, I still discover some of his films, ones that I haven't seen and catch up with, and I'm always so just enraptured with the intelligence. A lot of times there are these great screenplays that he and his screenwriters would come up with, and the wit, the intelligence, the ideas and the political statements and the sociological things that were being said in many of these films, I think really still resonate. And, some key films, you have Double Indemnity back in the 40s, which is, one of the great standout film noir movies with a great femme fatale played by Barbara Stanwyck. But then you go to something like Sunset Boulevard, which takes kind of that film noir idea, but then twists it to this kind of satire of Hollywood at the time. And with Norma Desmond, one of the great characters, that film's still so fantastic. And then you go to a movie like The 7-Year Itch, which was a great role for Marilyn Monroe and an iconic image of her standing over the grate. And then, of course, you get to the immortal films like Some Like It Hot, one of the all-time great comedies, cross-dressing, great again with Marilyn Monroe, but also Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis. And then my personal favorite of his films, Best Picture winner, The Apartment, which
Gosh, Shirley.
What?
I said Shirley. I love Shirley MacLaine.
Shirley MacLaine in that movie. Oh my God, yeah. But yeah, if you guys, anyone that hasn't seen The Apartment, don't think of it as an old black and white movie from 1960. Just go and watch this film, and it's still this really funny and emotional and powerful story about this guy who lets people, these rich, white bigwigs at his company, use his apartment, his bachelor pad, for their affairs. And then which is so, amazing. They're having an adult story like this back then in 1960 that they would put this out there. But, where the story goes from there is just, it's so awesome and moving. And the storyline with Shirley MacLaine's character is great. But yeah, just so many great films. And I think, very influential filmmaker in terms of romantic comedies and dramas and more of those types of films. Not so much like, you're not talking about the action type films as much anymore, but more intellectual, funny movies like that. Billy Wilder's influence is absolutely still felt. And I recommend anyone to discover his work as much as they can.
All right, Malcolm.
Yeah. Fun story. I was going to watch The Apartment the other day, but but then New Zealand Netflix decided to take it off. So I've not seen The Apartment, but I just know it was there one time. Then at the time I really wanted to watch it. It was gone. So
yeah.
So I haven't seen any Billy Wilder movies, so I have to say no.
Well, you have it to look forward to.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of his movies either, but I'm looking forward to watching a lot of them. Luca?
I absolutely adore Billy Wilder. Sunset Boulevard, I think, is the best movie. Is it the best movie ever made about Hollywood? It might
probably.
be.
Probably.
I think it very well might be. It's an incredible commentary on the world of Hollywood at the time. I love what he does. In general, I love what he does with his women actors.
Yeah.
Whether it's Gloria Swanson in Sunset Boulevard, Marilyn Monroe in 7-Year Itch or Something Like It Hot, Shirley, love of my life, MacLaine in The Apartment. Really
Irma la Douce.
Defines what we see as the romantic comedy, and defines sort of really codifies and sort of makes the apex of the film noir, and writes more cleverly about Hollywood than I think any filmmaker ever has. Spent a lot of time as a writer before getting into directing, which I think very much influences his style.
Yes.
He really is about the screenplay for him. And he's just an incredible talent. I would have said yes, but I'm not surprised that we're here at this tie point. But yeah, I would have given a yes.
I knew I was going to get to one that Hunter and Malcolm hadn't seen their films. it was going to happen sooner than later. So, sorry, guys.
All right. Moving on to me. I have to go with one of my favorite directors working today. I'm going Quentin Tarantino. And from the sound that Luca just made, I made the wrong decision. But the great thing about Tarantino is that none of his movies ever seem to bore me. I mean, he has great movies like Pulp Fiction, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. You've got Reservoir Dogs. You've got Hateful Eight. You've got Jackie Brown. You've got Kill Bill. Just the list goes on and on and on and on of great, fantastic movies with great actors who are really trying their best and give great performances every single time. And back to Spielberg, that's a tell a great director is when they can get the best performances out of their actors every single time. And that is what Quentin Tarantino does so well. And his dialogue is so unique. And just everything about Tarantino, I feel, is one of the best directors. Malcolm.
I mean, I like Tarantino. He does do good movies, but to put him in the top 10 directors of all time, I don't think he's there yet. So I'm going to have to say no.
All right, Luca.
It's a very interesting perspective that he's not yet there yet. He's been making movies for a very long time. Oh my god. I started getting into this whole trivia debate thing being like kind of neutral in a disinterested way about Tarantino. I didn't love his movies. I didn't really like many of his movies that much except for Inglourious. But like since getting into debate and trivia and like panel discussions and stuff like that, he's just grown to infuriate me more and more because everyone talks about him all the time. And I just don't get it. And I don't think I'm ever going to get it because like the thing about Tarantino is that he's like a buffet table of really cheap food. Like that's how I would describe it. Like you get an incredible variety of things and you get an incredible mix, but it feels really substandard. Every individual element feels substandard to me. I don't think his dialogue is particularly unique or interesting. I think all of his characters just kind of sound like him or are very stoic. So I don't really get much out of that. I think you need to do more than, cast good actors and have them give good performances to be considered an all-time great. I think that I won't go as far as some people and say that he's just a highwayman who's, a highway robber who's sticking directors up at gunpoint and stealing all of their good ideas. But I don't think if you were to say that, you would be completely inaccurate. Let's just put it that way. No.
All right. Jeremy.
Well, at the risk of infuriating Luca and also my wife, who really hates Tarantino, he would absolutely be on my list. Tarantino has been a huge influence for me since his first films came out in the early 90s. I'm getting dirty looks over here. I think there's few filmmakers who you can watch just a scene of two people talking in one of their films and it's riveting and thrilling in the way that Tarantino's films are. I think that I never thought of it as he's just ripping everyone off. I've thought of it as this is somebody who loves cinema and they're channeling that love of cinema into their films and into their own voice and making these unique films. And I think that he's had a great influence. I think that he will continue to have tremendous influence. And I think that he's one of the few filmmakers of the last 30 years that I would put up there in that higher echelon. So sorry, he is way up there for me, but not enough to get him on the list.
Yeah.
I'm with Julie on this one.
Yeah. Julie has a new friend. Can't stand him. She cannot stand him.
Well, one of my favorites is off the list. So let's move on to Malcolm.
Yeah, I'm going to try for this one. But yeah, I'm going to go for someone who's another Kiwi. Not no surprises there, but he's made a great movie which is known by a different one in the States, like but it's known as Bad Taste here. I can't remember what it's called in the States. It's something else. I know that, but
it's Bad Taste here.
You're talking about Brain Dead and Dead Alive. That's the distinct. That's the one. That
yeah.
That's the one I was thinking of. But yeah, I mean, he's made probably one of the greatest trilogies up there, like
the Hobbit trilogy.
Yeah,
of course.
I mean, the Hobbit. I mean, me and Roberts do share the love that we do really like the Hobbit trilogy as well as the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But
John Roca.
but I mean, this is one that Peter Jackson, I think, deserves to be up here. He whether it is his smallest stuff like The Frighteners, Heavenly Creature. I don't know. He's done a lot of like lesser movies that he sort of exploded onto the atmosphere when it came to doing Lord of the Rings and making a movie that had been nominated for a lot of Oscars. Like Return of the King was one of the highest movie that has won the most Oscars. But he's getting it. He just released a World War II documentary that has been getting a lot of good praise as well.
Was it World War One? I think it's World War One.
It was definitely a World War documentary.
I think it's World War One.
Talking about They Shall Not Grow Old, it's World War One. First World War.
Yeah.
But before I embarrass myself even more, Peter Jackson's on the table.
All right, so Peter Jackson, Luca.
Peter Jackson is in my bad books now at the moment because I love The Mortal Engines as a book series, and I watched the film recently, and it sucked. So no, because I am that petty.
He didn't direct it. He produced it.
He wrote it. He wrote it with Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens as well. I know that it was Christian Rivers who directed it, who was his storyboarding artist. Basically, it's a Peter Jackson project as far as I'm concerned. But he's responsible for it to some degree. So, but also there's a thing of like, I really, really love Bad Taste and Dead Alive because again, you know, I'm me. And I like Fellowship of the Ring a lot, and I like Two Towers a lot. But I'm not a huge Return of the King fan. Sorry. And I hated the Hobbit trilogy. And I didn't like his King Kong film. So Peter Jackson to me stinks of maybe he's going to delve into becoming a little bit George Lucas-y, where we start to realize the wizard behind the curtain is a bit of a fraud. But we'll see what happens. I can't say yes.
All right, Jeremy.
This is a tough one. I hate to break your heart, Malcolm. I really do love a lot of Peter Jackson's films. I actually personally think his best film is Heavenly Creatures. I saw that when it came out in the 90s, and it's a fantastic movie. I love the early, horror stuff they did. I remember when I was in film production, somebody brought in like a bootleg copy into our little lab of Meet the Feebles, and we were all watching this movie like, what the hell is this? And it was the most disgusting stuff involving puppets. It was great. But yeah, I love a lot of his films. I love the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I mean, I saw each of those three movies like 4 or 5 times in the theater back when they came out. I actually like his King Kong. I think it's got flaws, but there's a lot that I like about that movie. I'm not a fan of The Lovely Bones. And I couldn't get through the Hobbit trilogy. I will get through it on one of these days. I tried. But you know what? Just for the sake of us not being here all night and to not break Malcolm's heart, I'll say what the hell. Put him on. Sorry, Luca.
It's fine.
This one's really hard technically for me.
He directed a scene in which King Kong ice skates on a lake,
which I liked.
It should make it easier for you.
I really like the King Kong movie.
I thought that scene was kind of an adorable little thing to throw in there.
You know what? He makes the list.
All right.
I feel like there's a lot of movies that I absolutely love, including I enjoy and like the Hobbit trilogy. I'm one of the few, but I enjoy them. I love the Lord of the Rings. I love King Kong, so I'm putting him on the list. All right, Peter Jackson. All right, let's move on to Luca.
God, who am I going to go with now? Wash that taste out of my mouth.
Yeah.
I have to make it the foreignest, artsiest man that I can ever imagine. I actually got a few points here. So I'm going to just throw caution to the wind and probably extend this a little bit longer. Because I think that when you're talking about like greatest directors of all time, you kind of have to go back and look at directors who were working in the silent era. And we obviously have Hitchcock, who did a lot of work in the silent era. But one of the biggest movements in silent cinema that I think has influenced contemporary film in a big way was the German Expressionist film movement of the 1920s. And for me, the guy who defines that in a big way is Fritz Lang. He's an absolutely incredible director. Directed things like Metropolis, Dr. Movies The Gambler, directed a film called Harakiri, but he then came and worked in the Hollywood system. He worked in the sound film era. My favorite film is his film M, which is just absolutely brilliant.
Agreed.
Brilliant movie. Made a film called Hangmen Also Die. Fury is great. Metropolis is the one that really puts him on the list for me, though. It's not my favorite of his films, but it's got such an incredible scope to it. We don't have sci-fi cinema without Metropolis. It just doesn't exist in the way it exists now. An incredible director who worked in many, many different styles in different sort of film production environments. Didn't just make sort of sci-fi films and mystery movies and that sort of thing. Also made film noirs like The Big Heat, which is a great maybe. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Fritz Lang because I think that he's given a lot to contemporary cinema that we wouldn't have without him. We'll go with that.
All right, Jeremy.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Fritz Lang is an incredible filmmaker, really shaped cinema in so many incredible ways. Metropolis probably being the biggest standout, but for me, the movie that if I talk about this filmmaker, I have to urge everyone to see is M because it came out in 1931, and this is still one of the greatest like serial killer thriller movies ever made. It's chilling. It's resonant. This film, yeah, I get what you're doing there, Luca. I'm creeped out. If you've seen the movie, you know. But that movie still absolutely resonates, and it shows that a lot of movies we get today, do kind of rely on gore and shock and all these kind of things. And if you go back to a movie like M, it shows you can tell a story like this without any of that, just through suggestion and filmmaking excellence and the brilliant performance of the actor Peter Lorre, you can create such horror that is really real life horror of this guy who kills children in a way that still 90 years later almost is just as resonant. And I'm guessing this is gonna be another director maybe Malcolm and Hunter aren't familiar with, but I urge you to see some of those big titles in his resume because they still are you guys are still gonna love them today. I promise.
Yep, I've never seen any movie from him, but this is the thing I love about doing lists like this is that I am put on to new directors that I've, either never heard of or haven't seen a movie from, and now I'm going to do research on them. So thank you about that, Jeremy and Luca. Malcolm?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen bits and pieces of Metropolis through Watch Mojo List, but I don't know enough about him to say yes.
All right. So we were just on Luca, correct?
Back to Jeremy.
Okay.
Back to Jeremy.
All right. I don't want this to go all night, but I'm going to do my one other pick of my other director that I know that Hunter and Malcolm haven't seen his movies, just so I can at least get his name out there, get a little discussion. Because, like I said, when I was getting into cinema, I was researching and watching a lot of these great filmmakers, and there were certain directors like Godard, Fellini, directors that I appreciate what they did, but they never really hooked me, and I never really got fully invested in their films. I found a lot of them kind of just like they were an artsy sort of thing from another era that I felt like I was on the
I love 8.5 so much.
I do love La Dolce Vita, but that's another that's another thing. I just for whatever reason I was never as drawn into their work. But one filmmaker that though he did big artistic, sometimes pretentious films, he had a very big, huge filmography, and there were a lot of different types of films on there. And some of his best films were so resonant and so powerful and so moving and so, get you thinking intellectually in so many amazing ways. And that is the Swedish filmmaker Ingmar Bergman. Ingmar Bergman is probably most known for his film The Seventh Seal, which has the famous image of a knight playing chess with death. But it was a very influential movie for the foreign film cinema coming to the U.S. at the time. But even that movie, as great as it is and as influential, isn't one of my personal favorites. This is a filmmaker who's had such a wide-ranging filmography with things like The Virgin Spring, which is a kind of a drama set in the Middle Ages where a man avenges the death of his teenage daughter. It's a brutal and powerful film. Persona in the 60s, which is kind of a mind bender with these two women whose personalities kind of start to merge in interesting ways. And he actually, at a certain point in Persona, pulls back so that you actually see the filmmaking crew like they're a part of the story that you're watching. And it's a really interesting movie. But then in the 70s, he did a film called Scenes from a Marriage, which I think is still the best film that I've ever seen about the reality of a couple that, get married, they actually break up, and then they kind of have a bit of a reunion. It's powerful, real, like you're there, but it's like I kind of said with Tarantino, like it's two people talking and it's everything. It's interesting, it's involving in a way that few filmmakers can get to that. And he actually, the actress in the film, Liv Ullmann, he had a relationship with, so there's a lot of like real life in that movie. And then my personal favorite film of his, the one that really kind of changed my life, is called Fanny and Alexander. It's a film that came out in the 80s. I'm actually so hardcore that I love the 5-hour TV cut of the film.
The 5-hour TV cut is heavy.
It's great. There are more great scenes I love in that one. But the 3-hour version that was released in the abridged version in theaters here in the States and around the world is also great. And this is a film about two children in the early 1900s who live in this artistic family, and then there's a tragedy in their family, and they end up living in a different situation that kind of strips the joy and the art out of their lives. And but there's this joy and humanity in that film that is actually in a lot of his films, even some of the heavier ones, that is so moving and real. And just the camera, he was I'm sorry, blanking on his cinematographer. Can you help me, Luca?
His cinematographer is Sven Nykvist.
So, who also did some Woody Allen films. But yeah, just the visuals are incendiary. And again, look up some of his great films. Take a couple of those big titles and just check it out. I think you're going to see something that you haven't seen before. And I'm sorry about the subtitles, Malcolm, but sometimes it's worth it to get into these great filmmakers who really were doing something with cinema that hasn't been equaled and continues to have influence.
All right. So I want to pass because I haven't seen any of his movies.
Yep.
Apologize, Malcolm.
Yeah, I'm going to surprise you, mate. I've seen a few of his movies.
You have? Wow.
Yeah, it's when I was doing my film course, like we drew directors out of hats, so we had to sort of study him. So I've seen a few. I mean, I haven't seen
Kurosawa movies. Wait, hold on a second. What?
What's with this film course?
Sorry, go ahead.
No. This was a case of like they had a hat full of like various directors drew a name out. So
Gotcha.
Kurosawa was in there, but somebody else got him. So, but this was just one of those ones. Like I haven't seen a full movie yet, but I've seen enough to be able to confidently say yes to him because
awesome.
His work does look pretty good. So
I'm so happy right now.
All right, Luca.
Shocking.
Oh, Jeremy, thank you so much for this. And actually, Malcolm, thank you so much for this.
Yeah,
this is beautiful. I didn't expect this. I remember I was, I think, 16 when I first saw The Seventh Seal. And the famous image in that film is obviously the chess game with death. But there's a scene where a procession of plague victims go through a town. And they're self-flagellating and carrying crosses, and it's shot from a low angle, and they're all kind of moving across kind of around the camera, and you see this sort of beautiful and also horrible image of all of these people, and it was so incredibly striking to me. one of my partners is a medieval historian, and I watched that film with them. That wasn't the best idea I'd ever had because they were picking apart the details of, the church paintings and the architecture and stuff like that. And I was like, I'm trying to watch this. Please let me be. But it's that scene just captivated me so much. One of the films that you didn't mention, Jeremy, that I want to particularly take a look at is Wild Strawberries.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a film about a professor going across the country with his daughter to kind of collect is it an honorary doctor's degree?
Yeah,
I think it is.
Yeah.
And the professor is played by Victor Hjerström, who is an earlier Swedish director, and there's a bit of Ingmar paying tribute to earlier Swedish cinema in that film, and it's got such an incredible dream sequence in it. It's just absolutely beautiful. His film Cries and Whispers is about the best looking film in terms of color palette I've ever seen. And I do love Fanny Alexander, although I think it's very weird that he specifically was like, all of my films are an hour and a half. This one is 5 though. Like I don't know where that
Scenes from a Marriage was like 3.5.
Scenes from a Marriage is a little bit longer, but like Persona, Seventh Seal, Wild Strawberries, Cries and Whispers, they're all like an hour and a half. Sure. This one's 5 hours. But he's a phenomenal director, and I will absolutely, joyfully put him on the list.
Thank you.
Okay. All righty. So I'm going to pronounce...
Ingmar Bergman.
There you go. I do not want to mispronounce his name. All right, back to me.
Bergman, I guess.
All right. I'm going to go with... I'm really challenging between 2. I'm just going to go with Martin Scorsese, which Jeremy brought up a little while ago. I'm a huge, I guess, mob movie fan in a way. So like Goodfellas, Taxi Driver, Casino. I mean, the movies that he has done, they're classics in my opinion. The Wolf of Wall Street is a fantastic movie, my favorite one of 2013. Just the way his dialogue works off each other, the action, the sequences in his movies are fantastic. And this is a director who really understands his craft. And when he is into it and when he really wants to tell a great, gripping story, then he does, and in a way that's completely different. So I'm going Martin Scorsese. Malcolm?
Yeah, Martin Scorsese is definitely on my list. I've seen a lot of his movies. They're great. I mean, I watched The Departed for the first time the other day, and it really is captivating. It definitely showed why he deserved the Oscar for it. He's just done a lot. Like you can tell, he's had like inspirations from Francis Ford Coppola and stuff like that as well, and the way he sort of presents his movies. So it's definitely an easy yes for me.
All right, Luca.
So Malcolm actually mentioned why this is a bit of a tricky one for me, because like Martin Scorsese is obviously very firmly placed in like new Hollywood. He's a film school brat type. And I love his movies. My favorite films of his are not necessarily his mob films. I like Taxi Driver. I love Raging Bull. I love Lost Temptation of Christ. I love King of Comedy, which is kind of a bit of an underrated one. But so my difficulty is it's like there's 3 spots left, and there are other like new Hollywood and classical Hollywood directors that I might pick over him, and I also kind of feel like I know where this is going anyway, so I'm going to be the devil's advocate and say that he's not in the top 3 of people that haven't been mentioned yet that might get on the list. So I'm going to say no, even though he is an incredible director and deserves all the credit in the world, and, you know, should have won many, many more Academy Awards than he has, including for Hugo, by the way. I love Hugo. I know Hugo's a bit of a divisive one. I adore it.
All right, Jeremy.
And I would argue he does belong in the list of the three left. I think that Scorsese is one of the all-time greats, a defining filmmaker of our time, and all those titles that you mentioned, from Goodfellas to Taxi Driver to Raging Bull, all these great films, are landmark films, but he's one of the few filmmakers. When you go through his filmography, there's all these smaller movies too that are really wonderful and worth seeking out. Films like Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore and The Last Waltz and After Hours.
Age of Innocence.
Age of Innocence. I love that movie. Yeah. There's so much there. And I think, to me, maybe even on par with Spielberg, I think he is like the defining filmmaker of that new Hollywood generation. I think his influence is felt in the way that few are. And how can you not be captivated by his films? It's there. And again, like there are ideas, like I think there's kind of an obsessive quality to the thematic elements of a lot of his films, kind of like with Hitchcock, that is interesting. A lot of his characters are very flawed and very obsessive and self-destructive. And I think that is, I've actually kind of gotten something from watching those films, putting myself in those mindsets and seeing how people can go wrong or, like self-destruct in certain ways. I think that it's powerful stuff. And so, yes, I do have to say yes and put him on the list.
Yes. All right. Martin Scorsese makes the list. Malcolm, on to you. We have 2 spots remaining.
Wasn't it a tie? Because I said no. Oh, but
No.
You said yes.
Yeah, I don't. For some reason, I thought I said no, but never
No.
mind.
Would you like to change your vote?
No.
Can I interest you in the Church of Martin Scorsese skepticism? Our slogan is
no,
not as good as
but-
Francis.
No, but I'm going to go back to the 1900s to bring up another classical silent movie director. I think he's directing. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but Charlie Chaplin, I think, he directed stuff as well, didn't he?
Yes,
He directed
he
movies,
directed.
yes.
He directed. Yeah, his great films.
Yeah, I knew he acted. I just wasn't sure he
Absolutely.
directed. I mean, this is one that when you think of silent movies, like the one that instantly comes to mind is Charlie Chaplin. Just like he's really iconic. It was like a lot of people sort of mistake his moustache for Hitler's, even though they don't look the same. They just slightly different. But Charlie Chaplin, I think, deserves to be on this list for what he did personally to silent movies. Like a lot of his movies, like The Gold Rush, The Tramp, and are all considered sort of classics.
City Lights, man.
Modern Times.
Yeah. I mean, he's definitely done a lot.
Kid.
So
Great
yeah,
Dictator as well in the Speech Heroes.
Yep.
So yeah, Charlie Chaplin's on the table.
Okay.
Uncomfortable silence for a minute there. All right.
But we're doing we're reenacting his movies. We just need a piano.
All right, Luca, on to you.
That's so hard. No, don't go to me, please. Skip.
All right, Jeremy.
Come back.
Yeah, I know Luca wants to leave it open to try to get some other, people on there, but I can't say no to Chaplin. Chaplin, really shaped cinema in so many ways, especially comedy and the language of visual comedy and film. When it was all, kind of the Keystone Cops kind of comedy, a little more slapsticky stuff. Chaplin saw comedy, as a real art form, as a visual art form, and lifted it, and eventually got to a film like The Great Dictator, which is this really powerful message film, right in the smack dab of Hitler's era during World War II in 1940. That to me, and that movie really did open a lot of people's eyes to what was going on and that they needed to get into the war effort. And it's like to go from, the early days of comedy to something like that. It just shows such a powerful stamp and a powerful voice in cinema, and just, you go back and watch, Charlie Chaplin films like The Gold Rush, like City Lights, and other great silent comedians like Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd, and those movies are still fun. They're still funny. They're still entertaining. They're not movies that are boring or old, or they feel very vital because humor is forever, and visual comedy is always gonna relate. And I hope that people could see Charlie Chaplin's name on a list like this and realize how vital that period of silent film really still is and needs to be rediscovered. So it's a yes for me.
All right, and going on to me again. Skip, I've never seen any of his movies.
Oh boy, it's up to Luca.
It's up.
God, it really is up to me. God damn it. I honestly, I'm genuinely struggling with this a lot. Shit. So I think ultimately Charlie Chaplin's movies are defined primarily by Chaplin as a performer. And I'm talking about that in terms of the broad scale of his films, from the kind of his films in the 1910s are often funny, but they're very, very short and often just like skits. So when it goes from a film like The Kid from 1921, for example, or The Tramp, his films are really defined by him as a performer. It starts to change a bit when you get to The Great Dictator, and he starts writing dialogue in his movies as well as writing jokes and slapstick comedy bits. But ultimately what it comes down to for me is that I don't see enough of the turning point where it starts to become Charlie Chaplin as director for me to say yes to it. And I'm not just saying that because I do want to get some more people on this list, some different people on this list. I think I just feel ultimately like he belongs on a top 10 performers, like actors, performers of all time list. I think maybe a lot of it has to do with the fact that I prefer films, the Buster Keaton films, and I prefer Harold Lloyd. Safety Lost is my favorite silent comedy. Just for
I absolutely agree, by the way.
But I kind of have to say no, even though that was like really, really hard to work through because we obviously owe so much to him.
My next nomination, Buster Keaton.
We're getting to my next nomination first, Jeremy.
Okay. I'm kidding. Anyway.
Jeremy.
Jeremy.
All right, look, go ahead with your pick.
Okay, so I think I'm going to give up. I feel like I kind of have to give up my string of people who aren't American white guys. Because I'm slightly worried that we're not going to get Stanley Kubrick on this list, and I feel like that would be a bit of a crime, because we've got a bunch of sort of very good like populist filmmakers on the list. We've got some sort of art house film directors. We've got some international directors, but in my mind, Kubrick brings the art house to a wider audience in a way that I don't think anyone else does. And he really does bring this very much art film tendency and projects it in films in genres and categories that we would kind of consider as being more for mainstream consumption. Sci-fi films like 2001: A Space Odyssey, horror films like The Shining, war films like Full Metal Jacket, dark comedies like Dr. Strangelove, war films like Paths of Glory, historical epics like Spartacus, although that's not one of my favorite films of his. Romance movies like Barry Lyndon, which are also period pieces. He's a meticulous director. His films tend to be slow-paced. They tend to be pensive. They tend to be thoughtful. And while he is, for all intents and purposes, from what we have heard from the Duvall estate and the Duvall matter, a seemingly a very bad man who would do quite bad things to get good performances out of people. As an artist, ultimately, I think he's given so much and has created work of such an incredible standard. I would argue it really kicks off in a big way with The Killing. And then, I mean, I personally think it goes all the way to the end. I think Eyes Wide Shut is a great movie. He's a true master of the screen, and I think he deserves to be recognized as such. So I'm going to put Stanley Kubrick on the table and see how that goes.
All right, Jeremy, Kubrick.
I promise you he was going to be my next pick, Luca.
That's fair.
Mine too, actually.
You have to have Kubrick on this list. You know, I've talked about my early like film watching days a little bit, and again, I had parents that weren't maybe the best, and pretty much let me watch anything. There would be videotapes just left in the apartment. I would get up in the morning while they were still sleeping and just watch these movies. And I remember like Aliens and all these different movies I watched, you know, by myself when I was like 6 or 7. And I think the movie that shaped me more than any other film, which I saw when I was 5 years old, is The Shining. I saw The Shining when I was 5.
Wait,
and that
5?
movie. 5 years old, with my family, and that movie is still my favorite horror film. It's still the movie, like some people might know, I have this great love of Stephen King and his books, and is one of my passions. And it all starts from that viewing of The Shining. And I think if you watch horror films as a kid, you know, either one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to end up horrified and scarred for life and hating horror movies forever, or you're going to end up a ghoul who loves horror and loves all that stuff like me. So that's usually, it's going to go one way or the other. But yeah, so many great films.
I watched horror movies as a kid, and if people know me, you know I'm a weird person.
Yes, you are, Luca.
Yeah. But so many, you know, great films, you know, obviously the great classics that Luca mentioned. And I think there's kind of this feeling that, you know, he's a very cerebral director, a very cold director in some ways, which I think is true of some of those films.
But I was very funny.
Yeah, well, that movie's a struggle, but I would actually point to an early film, which I think is a real great film that isn't maybe as mentioned as much, and that's Paths of Glory, which is a World War I movie starring Kirk Douglas. And the final sequence of that film, to me, is still one of the most moving scenes that I've seen. And it's in a Kubrick film, and it actually involves his real-life wife, which is kind of an interesting little nugget there. So, yeah, he is one of the greats, and you can't talk about cinema without talking about Stanley Kubrick.
All right, so going on to me, it's a yes for me. I love a lot of his movies, including The Shining, which is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. The way that the movie is shot scares the shit out of me every time I watch it. I learn new things about it every time I watch it. But also movies like A Clockwork Orange, which is a very weird, twisted movie, but the way that he portrays it, with the camera cuts and the long takes, make it so creepy and like gives me chills down my spine. And 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is a great sci-fi movie. I mean, he literally has done every type of movie, and in my opinion, has done almost all of them completely either good or great. So yes, he makes the list. Malcolm, what would you have said?
Yeah, I would have said yes to Kubrick. I mean, taking like all the stories of him being horrible to actors aside, this is about his movies and stuff. And it's like his movies are beautifully shot. Like I've seen most of them. There's probably still a handful I've still got to see, because I've still got to see 2001. But I've seen his last one. He did the Tom Cruise Eyes Wide Shut one, but yeah, he's definitely got one of those ones that had a lot of interesting sort of shots and various different shots. Like every movie he makes never seems to be the same, so I would have suggested him easily.
All right, so Stanley Kubrick makes the list, and Jeremy, we're back to you, and we have one more spot left.
Well, we actually got through all the ones that I had written down there, so I'm going to have to kind of wing it here. There's a lot of other great filmmakers I could throw out there that, you know, probably Hunter and Malcolm and other people haven't seen. People like the great Japanese filmmaker Yasuhiro Ozu, American filmmakers like Robert Altman, who did so many great films. But yeah, which I'm tempted to put on there, but you know, I don't want this to go all night, so I'm just going to go for one that violates what I said earlier, which with Mel Brooks, where somebody makes a string of great movies and then kind of trails off, and maybe their legacy kind of fades. Usually that would exclude them, but this is the one exception for me, because this person the stretch that they went on is so unequaled. Like, what a stretch of films to make, that I think even with the career kind of declining afterward, I still he kind of has to be on the conversation for me. And that is another one of those new Hollywood guys, Francis Ford Coppola, who made went from The Godfather to The Conversation to The Godfather Part 2 to Apocalypse Now in the 1970s, which are, you know, among my favorite films. I think The Godfather, those first two films, they're still, you know, in my top 3 of all time. Every time they're on TV, or, you know, I'm in the mood to watch them, I'm captivated. They never get old for me. And he just you know, he really revolutionized a lot of things in cinema in that time. And even, you know, early on made some great movies early on, like The Rain People, which is a film that's a little forgotten, but that kind of led to him getting the Godfather later on. And I do think he's, even, you know, when his career kind of declined in the 80s, there's still some interesting movies that I love, like Rumblefish, and a movie that's very underrated called Tucker, the Man in His Dream, with Jeff Bridges. I think that the intelligence and the cinematic craft was always there, even when he was, you know, misstepping and having some issues, films, you know, going over budget and all these issues that he had. But you know, I just, you know, I can't personally not put the guy that made The Godfather in the conversation in the discussion. So,
All right, let's go on to Malcolm. Francis Ford Coppola.
Yeah, I was sitting here thinking I was going to play strategy until it got back to me. But Jeremy just had to throw one that really made it hard for me to say no to. Francis Ford Coppola deserves to be on this list. Like, I mean, I've only just recently seen The Godfather. Like, before that, it's like, took me a while to get to it, because I just, it's like, for a long time I was in the mindset, it's like, it's an old movie, I probably won't enjoy it.
yeah.
I don't really have time to sit through it, but I found time to sit through it. I watched it and I loved it. I mean, I'm still going to get to Apocalypse Now, but there's a few others of his I have seen, but I'm going
Did
to
you see part 2 yet?
It's not on Netflix.
Okay, well, you have that to look
There's a-
forward to. That's my favorite one.
Yeah, they only put the first one on Netflix so far. They have a
Awesome.
habit of just putting bits and
Yeah.
pieces of franchises on. So.
Gotcha.
All right, Luca.
It's your favorite film ever, isn't it, Jeremy? Godfather Part 2?
It is.
So I would be a bad film fan if I didn't love Francis Ford Coppola's output in the 70s. You know, going from Godfather to The Conversation, which is my just my favorite.
It's great.
It's probably in my top 20 of the 70s. But like, now that Scorsese's on the list, and Jeremy's right, Coppola fell off hard, ending in like a horrible movie in 1996, which was released the same year that I was released, called Jack.
Yeah.
And, you know, the best thing that film did is to be able to say, you know, to allow my parents to say that they made something better in 1996 than Francis Ford Coppola did.
What's that terrible Val Kilmer movie? I'm trying to remember the name of that one.
I don't know what that movie is called.
I actually saw it, and I can't even remember the name.
It's not good.
Yeah.
I think ultimately it's just not consistent enough. There are filmmakers that are more consistent and have made more consistently higher quality films than Coppola, and Scorsese is already on the list. So
Yeah.
I no.
All right, it's down to me. God damn it, Jeremy. All right, I'm gonna get hate for this, but I've seen the first Godfather, and it didn't do it for me. That's just me, you know.
That's a rare example of a wrong opinion there.
Yep.
I know other people don't like it.
I know. And I mean, there are good moments in it. I just couldn't get fully invested in it. So yeah, I'm gonna have to say no on that one. All right, so yeah, that's a tie, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on.
All right. Oh shit, back to me. Oh God. Let's see, which one do I want to go with? All right. You know what? I'll go with one that I don't think is gonna make it, but if it does, I will be really happy. Let me see if I can.
If
find
anyone
it.
says Michael Bay, I'm leaving. Sorry, Sandy.
It's Michael Bay. No, I'm going John Hughes,
Oh,
and mostly because his movies are what I grew up on. I grew up on stuff like 16 Candles, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Uncle Buck, and my favorite, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. He just does movies that make you happy, make you. His movies make you feel a lot of different types of emotions, but at the end of it, you always feel happy. You always feel excited. It makes you feel like a kid again. And this is just a personal choice on my end because, like I said, I grew up watching a lot of his movies, and they shaped my childhood in a way where it's okay to not grow up and just enjoy movies for what they are. So I'm going John Hughes and Malcolm.
Yeah, I mean, I love John Hughes. All his comedies are really good. I'm going to lean towards no. I mean, more for strategy reasons. I think he's just outside of the top 10 for me personally, anyway.
Yeah. Luca?
And John Hughes makes very funny movies and has very kind of identifiable, relatable casts. And I think that his films, largely speaking, are good. And I think that he's a good filmmaker. But ultimately, I don't think that he's cutting edge enough or daring enough to really be in conversation for the top 10 greats of all time. I think if you want to be in that conversation, you got to take a little bit more risk than Hughes does. And like the Hughes films that people remember are really, really good. But then you've got films like She's Having a Baby,
Yeah.
which is really,
I love that movie.
really hard to watch. And like
man.
I'm not super fond of Uncle Buck. I don't like
I
Weird
love it.
Science.
Love it.
Of course you do. You were raised on
Of
it.
course I do.
But yeah, I'm gonna give it a no. Even though I like the good John Hughes movies.
Yeah.
He's a better writer than he is a director as well, to be fair.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree on that one. Jeremy?
That's not a name I expected to hear come out of your mouth. So that threw me for a loop. I don't think do I think he's one of the 10 greatest of all time? No, but I don't think I could actually, like, the word no could not come out of my mouth. He's had such an impact on my life, being from the 80s and those movies and the themes and, you know, what they mean to me personally. So I would be forced to say yes, but at this point, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it's a tie. All right. I just had to get him brought up somehow, and I did. So I'm proud of myself. Malcolm, on to you.
Yeah, there's a few on my list that I want to bring up. Gonna try for this one. And I know if Chance is out there, he's going to think I'm doing it just for the joke, but I do believe he belongs here because he's gotten the same sort of group of actors to Oscars recently, and of course I'm talking about David O apostrophe Russell.
Oh man.
but like. And he's had a string like Silver Linings Playbook, American Hustle. I think he got that Bradley Cooper, Jennifer Lawrence group sort of up for Oscars sort of consecutively. I think it is consecutive movies anyway. But and for someone to do that quite a few times, I think they're doing something right. Silver Linings Playbook is really good. I do enjoy American Hustle. I haven't rewatched it in a while, so it may be different now. But like, he's had a few other ones that I like. I actually enjoy I Heart Huckabees. I think it is a kind of great fun. But yeah, David O. Russell is on the table.
All right, David O apostrophe Russell. Luca.
I haven't liked a David O. Russell movie since The Fighter, and I haven't loved a David O. Russell movie since Three Kings, and that's a while back. So I'm going to go ahead and say no. I find Joy and Silver Linings Playbook and American Hustle to like, they're the kind of films that leave a starchy layer on the roof of your mouth. They're just a bit of a slog to sit through, and I just kind of sit there dead-eyed when I'm watching them. I'm not super invested in them. I'm gonna give it a no.
Jeremy.
I actually do really love a few of his films. I personally do really like Silver Linings Playbook and, of course, Three Kings, The Fighter. These are really good movies. But I think if you take one of, there's a crop of filmmakers that started making films in the 90s and then went on to, really take Hollywood by storm in the 2000s and the 2010s, and I think there's 3 or 4, maybe 5 I would put above David O. Russell. A couple Andersons that I would put above David O. Russell, so it would be a no for me.
And I don't think I've seen a movie made by him. So,
wow.
All right, let's move on to Luca.
Speaking of Anderson,
hey, here we go.
Am I going to pick the right one? So yeah, in terms of, I wanted to talk about directors who are making work today, because we have a couple of directors on the list who are making work today, but none who are really kind of defined by their 21st century work. And while I think that name drop Paul Thomas Anderson is the one that I've gone with, well, I think that he made some incredible films in the 90s, Hard Eight, Boogie Night, and Magnolia. He's really defined by his 2000s work. And what defines Paul Thomas Anderson's work is this ability to get to the core questions of like human desire and human greed and human flaws in a really sort of direct way. His films can be pretty funny. I think Boogie Nights has some very funny moments in it, but they're also usually uncomfortable and often kind of tricky to watch, but also so incredibly captivating. He shoots dialogue like nobody else. Some of the conversations between Daniel and Eli in There Will Be Blood are so intense to watch. And in particular, the programming scene in The Master between Joaquin Phoenix and Philip Seymour Hoffman, where he's doing the after this you will not blink, if you blink we go back to the start. It's just the best, in my opinion, the best dialogue scene in any film. And then recently he came back with he did Inherent Vice in 2014, and then in 2017 he released Phantom Thread, which I thought was a very, very good, well-made film with a great central performance that I absolutely loved, with an unbelievable score, by the way, incredible score. Yeah. One of my favorite scores of
Johnny Greenwood
of the 20th century whatsoever. I think he's a real sort of director who's really striving for that sort of auteur stamp in the current era, but also just making incredible movies while doing it. I wasn't going to go with Wes, so let's talk about Paul.
All right, Jeremy.
I think he, for me, probably is the best filmmaker working today. Every one of his films has been very important for me personally. I think his work is tremendous. Just the depths that he goes to portraying, kind of like I mentioned with Scorsese, with kind of the more obsessive characters and the darker corners of the human soul. He's one of the filmmakers for me has portrayed that in vivid detail, maybe as well as anyone else, as any other filmmaker. And just on a personal note, I won't get too deep into it, but a while back, I actually lost my mom, who had been ill for a very long time. And obviously it was a very hard period, after she passed. And that was at the time that the film The Master came out, and I watched The Master, loved it, and I just went back and started watching PTA's films again, because when I see a movie by a director that I really like, I'll often go back, I'm gonna watch their other movies again. And I rewatched Magnolia at that time, and so watching it again, it hit me in a way that it was so powerful at that moment, and I probably watched it 30 or 40 times in the next few weeks and months. And I honestly think that movie in a way kind of saved my life and got me through that period, because the themes of parental relationships with kids and parents dying and all of that stuff in that movie he was going through something similar when he made the film. And I think if you're going through something like that, that movie is so powerful and so important and so meaningful if you find it at the right time. And I think that cinema can actually do that. Cinema can actually touch you and change your life when you need it. And it's one of the art forms that I think can do that best. And that movie for me did that. And yeah, it's a yes on PTA.
All right, Malcolm.
For me, it's the wrong, Anderson. If you had said Wes, it would be a definitive yes.
I'm never going to
but,
say Wes.
I'm a fan.
I figured as much.
I like Fantastic Mr. Fox. He's my twee Tarantino.
but with Paul Thomas Anderson, I do like his work, so I'm still going to say yes to it as well.
Wow.
Wow.
Swerved.
Okay. Paul Thomas Anderson makes the list.
Have
I
you seen his
appreciate that.
movies, Hunter?
I've seen one,
Which one?
Boogie Nights.
All right, there you go.
Nice.
It's a great one.
Oh, we didn't mention Punch Drunk Love, by the way.
Oh God, yes.
Great,
All
great,
right,
great,
so-
very, very good film.
I've seen
He's
that
also
one.
one of the only filmmakers who can whose films can consistently lose money, and people will still give him movies to do.
Yeah.
All right. So,
He gets those great actors.
yeah. All right. So we have our top 10 finally. All right. So we have Alfred Hitchcock, Akira Kurosawa. Did I say that?
Kurosawa.
Kurosawa.
Kurosawa. We have Hayao
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 Miyazaki.
Miyazaki.
Dude,
It's
We're
okay.
getting there.
We know what you're saying.
Steven Spielberg, Spike Lee, Peter Jackson, Luca.
Ingmar Bergman.
There we
Hey.
go. Martin
Hey, that was my
Scorsese,
pick.
Stanley Kubrick, and Paul Thomas Anderson. All right, guys. So next, we must eliminate 3 directors. Sadly,
Doing honorable mentions, by the way.
yes. Let's do that before we hit number 1.
We hit number 1. Got it.
All right. So, write down which one should be eliminated first.
Or in
Tough.
Lucas' case, just say it because we can't
Yeah.
see the score.
Yep. Let's say it.
Oh, I'm gonna write it down, guys. God.
Just make sure we can see it.
You're gonna have to hear it.
Do you have to have 3 votes to get them off?
Yes.
Okay.
So majority rules.
Darn it.
Well, no, if it has a majority, right? So if one has 2 and the 2 other films have 1
Oh,
each,
yeah,
then-
yeah.
Yeah.
Two. Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
Perfect.
All right. So Jeremy, we're starting with you.
I'm so sorry, brother, Peter Jackson.
Luca,
Peter Jackson.
Malcolm.
I went with Peter Jackson.
Oh, wow.
All right.
Hey,
I had.
I-
I had.
Don't tell us.
Luca.
Don't tell us.
say it.
Don't tell us.
Someone
tell
be
us.
like-
Huh?
I mean,
We'll find out. We'll find out.
Yeah.
but it's just a case of looking who's there. Is like Peter Jackson for me is a safe 10. I
Yeah.
don't think I could put him higher than that.
Hmm.
So Peter Jackson is eliminated. All right.
Ooh, I don't know where to.
Yeah, this now gets very tricky. It's a pretty good
Yeah,
list.
I am struggling.
I've come to expect an easier time cutting things from your lists, Hunter.
Yeah, I know.
These guys are also good. Okay, sure.
All right.
I'm so sorry. Can you read it one more time?
So
Maybe
it's
there's-
Hitchcock, Kurosawa, Miyazaki, Spielberg, Spike Lee, Bergman, Scorsese, Kubrick, and PTA.
Oh man. All right.
All right. I have mine.
Okay.
All right. Let's start with Malcolm.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but part of the reason I said yes to him is so I could eliminate him.
Only reason.
Thomas Anderson.
Luca.
I also went with PTA.
Wow. Jeremy.
I don't want to say. Well, I guess we might tie.
Yeah.
Just to try to move it along, I said Bergman, even
Yeah.
though he's in my top 7. But I'm trying.
Are we tied?
Well, we're
Yep.
we're deadlocked now. So what do we do?
Well, we eliminate both of them because there are 2 that
Yeah.
need to be eliminated.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
So
I like that 7.
all right. So Paul Thomas Anderson and Bergman are eliminated. All right.
I fell on the Bergman sword to save Kurosawa.
Fair.
All right, we have our top 7. Luca, do you want to go over them real quick?
Alfred Hitchcock, Akira Kurosawa, Hayao Miyazaki, Steven Spielberg, Spike Lee, Martin Scorsese, Stanley Kubrick.
Yep. What a list. All right,
I didn't know we'd end up with a great list like this. Good job, guys.
all right, so vote for number 7. I hate myself for this, but
Yeah, I hate myself for this one.
all right.
I hate myself for a lot of things.
Yeah, I do too.
All right, I'll start. I have Spike Lee. Malcolm,
I've got Scorsese, Skizzy.
Luca,
There we
I also have Scorsese.
and Jeremy.
And I also have Spike Lee.
That means that they're joint 6th in this top 7.
So 6th and 7th.
6 and
Gotcha.
7. Yep.
All right.
Okay, so it doesn't matter which one we put them in. All right, so I guess we'll vote for number 5 next, right?
We're voting for number 5, yeah, because they're joint. So it's how it works is if it's a tie, it's joint the higher number. So it's like joint 6th.
Yeah. All right. So we're voting for number 5. Oof.
I think this is a good place for this one.
Oh shit! I've lost one of the. I deleted one of them from the list. So it's Martin Scorsese, Spike Lee, Steven Spielberg, Miyazaki, Kurosawa, Hitchcock, and who?
Hitchcock and
Well, Scorsese's tied for 6, so it's
No.
Spielberg. I think is the one you're missing.
Was
No.
there
No,
one more?
I'm not missing Spielberg. I have Hitchcock, Kurosawa, Miyazaki, Spielberg, Spike Lee, and Martin Scorsese. Who am I missing?
Stanley
Still-
Kubrick.
Stanley Kubrick. Yeah. Okay.
There you go.
all right. Is everyone ready?
Not me because I now need to
Oh, okay.
put everything down. Yeah, no, I've got it.
All right.
I'm good.
Malcolm,
Spielberg.
Luca,
Ooh.
Spielberg.
Jeremy,
I'm sorry, I actually had Miyazaki.
and I have Kurosawa.
interesting.
Spielberg. Number
So
5.
Spielberg is number 5.
That's fine. That's okay.
I mean, it's not a bad spot.
No, that's good.
Not at all. All right. So we're voting for number 4. All right. So is everyone ready?
Mhm.
Let's start with Luca.
Miyazaki.
Jeremy,
Miyazaki.
Malcolm.
Kurosawa.
I also have Kurosawa.
The
So,
Japanese,
joint-
Japanese guys are joint
the-
3rd.
The joint 3rd.
Yep.
There you go.
So it would be 4th and 3rd, correct?
Well, it'll be joint
Yeah.
3rd.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
So now do we write down our number 1?
Yep.
And I have to say, it was funny how that happened. Both Japanese people tied at the same spot.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is actually really hard.
we're voting for number 1, right?
Yeah.
Yes, we
Yep.
are.
Honorable mentions.
I'm about to. Once
Okay.
everyone writes it down. All right. So before we reveal our number 1, let's do some honorable mentions. Let's start with Luca since he's so excited to get his out of the way.
Very, very excited to get my honorable mentions out of the way because I got a bunch. So I wanted to bring up Dario Argento, great Italian horror filmmaker. My actual favorite director of all time was someone who I didn't bring up because I knew that it would never, ever, ever happen in 1,000 years. But Andrei Tarkovsky, he's a Russian filmmaker, made The Mirror, which is one of my favorite films of all time, made Nostalgia, which is starkly beautiful. I love Wong Kar-wai. I've got a bunch of foreign people up first, and then there are some English people sort of later down. Wong Kar-wai, Sergei Eisenstein is part of the Soviet montage filmmakers, very, very important. I also have Ozu, Werner Herzog and Wim Wenders, 2 incredibly important new German filmmakers. David Cronenberg, body horror, like the body horror guy. Terrence Malick used to be one of my favorite directors, but then he made Song to Song and Night of Cups and I gotta bring up Guillermo del Toro. I love the man more than life itself. Nick Rogue, Sidney Lumet, the Coen brothers, Gaspar Noé is a great French extreme filmmaker. David Lynch is one of my favorite American filmmakers. Andrzej Zulawski made a film called Possession and a film called Diablo, which are both very good. Brad Bird's a great animated director, and then there's a bunch of great British filmmakers: Ken Russell, Terence Davies, and Ken Loach. Satoshi Kon is another anime movie director who I don't think gets enough love. And then I've just got just a few more that I'm going to ring off very quickly.
right.
Alfonso Cuarón, Agnes Varda, Claire Denis, Jean-Luc Godard, Francois Truffaut, Ridley Scott, Toby Hooper, John Carpenter, Wes Craven, Takashi Miike, Rob Reiner, and then two that I was super surprised didn't get mentioned at all were Orson Welles and John Ford, who are like archetypical classic Hollywood filmmakers.
Yeah.
That was why I was so excited for the honorable mentions, because I have a bunch.
Yeah.
All right, Jeremy, on to yours.
I'm not going to repeat, like, Luca had a ton of mine, like John Ford, obviously, and Wells, and so many of the ones that he mentioned. So I'll try to throw just a few more out there that didn't get mentioned. F.W. Murnau, also going back to the silent era.
Nosferatu.
Yeah,
like the Herzog
Nosferatu
one
and Sunrise. Yeah, and then Frank Capra, who, another one of my favorites from the classic Hollywood era. And then let's see, Antonioni. My mind's blanking now. Yeah, that's probably good. I'm like, I said Robert Altman, Hal Ashby, another 70s director that I
Hal
love.
Ashby's great.
Love his films. Yeah, that'll. I'll throw another woman out there. Jane Campion has made some great films.
Andrea Arnold as well, very, very, very good.
Yeah, she's definitely got a lot of promise. She's up and coming. So, all right.
All right, on to me. I actually have a few. I have Clint Eastwood, James Cameron, Tim Burton, Ridley Scott, Christopher Nolan, Denis Villeneuve.
Denis Villeneuve, yeah.
Yep. Edgar Wright, James Wan, Sam Raimi, because personal opinion right here, and Ryan Coogler.
James Wan is a hot take. I like that.
There's some great picks there that I didn't think of, Hunter. Nazario would murder me for not saying Tim Burton. Thank you for saving us.
And Malcolm, on to yours.
Well, all mine that I had written down have been said. But a few that haven't been said, like I don't know if I actually heard them, but there's just a lot of names thrown out there. But I was considering bringing up the Russo brothers for what they did for the MCU. And, I mean, Sam Raimi was there, like Jane Cameron, like Nicky Caro is another great Kiwi director. Lee Tamahiri, and I can't think of any other great New Zealand ones, but there's a lot out there. Just
definitely.
Wait, Lee Tamahori, the Die Another Day guy?
Yeah.
Well, he's done a lot of sort of New Zealand movies.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He did The Edge. Did The Edge with Alec Baldwin and Anthony Hopkins.
All right, everyone. Let's get to our number one. Let's start with Jeremy. What's your number one?
It's Kubrick.
And Malcolm.
Yeah, this was tough to choose between them, but I went with Hitchcock.
Luca.
Gotta give it to Alfred.
I have Kubrick.
Wow.
Joint number one, joint number third, joint number sixth.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. So
The only spot on the list that is occupied by one man is Steven at Spielberg at 5.
He stands alone.
All right. So
I actually really like the way that these ties have leveled out. Like, we've got Hitchcock and Kubrick arguably very, very tied together in terms of their approach. We've got the two Japanese guys, and then we've got the two guys who don't know if they hate New York or want to fuck New York.
That's true.
the way you said. All right. So let me see if I got this right. So we have joint number ones, number threes, and number 5.
6. No,
Yeah,
joint
six,
number
6
1,
and
joint
7.
number 3, and joint number 6.
It was Scorsese at 6, and who else?
Scorsese and Spike Lee at 6.
I thought Spike Lee was. Oh, okay, never mind. Yep.
Yeah, he made it.
All right. So we have no number 7, no number 4,
No number 7, no number 4, and no number 2.
and no number 3. All right. So we have at number 6 Martin Scorsese and Spike Lee. Number 5 Steven Spielberg. Number 3 Luca.
Hayao Miyazaki and Akira Kurosawa, the guys who they got me on the show to pronounce.
There we go. And number 1 and I guess number 2 in this case, Stanley Kubrick and Alfred Hitchcock. What a
There's a
list!
poetic justice there. I like
What
that.
what a weird list that was. No number 2, no number 4, and a tied 6, 3, and 1.
Doesn't matter though. It's 7 great names that
Exactly.
belong there.
Definitely.
I mean, it just goes to show that like every director, like it's so relatively close. Like everyone's got a very varying opinion. It's really hard when it comes to ranking them. It gets really hard, and you
Yeah.
end up with ties.
Oh yeah, definitely. All right, so that was the list. That was a long list, but it was a very fun list. Let's get to the closing plugs. Let's start with Jeremy. Where can people find you?
At Full Metal Trivia and Full Metal Media, it's a movie trivia channel. We also have some content kind of akin to this over there, the Full Metal 5 list. But if you love movie trivia and playing and just love movies in general, join our Facebook page and YouTube and over there. And you can also find me. I have my own YouTube channel, Jeremy Paul Adams, and my own Facebook page.
All right, Luca.
I'm not going to give you my Facebook page. No thanks. Don't appreciate that. You can find me. Where can you find me at the moment? Not really many places. You can find me at Jukebox Trivia, being the champion of Jukebox Trivia, because I like music too. I'm having a movie battleground debate with Chance Ellison very soon, and movie battleground that's happening at some point in the near future. Tomorrow night, I think. I don't know when it's going to be up. Besides that, like if Full Metal, if me and Ed Sale haven't like fallen off the map of Full Metal, you can maybe see us there at some point.
Oh, you'll be there. Absolutely. I'm very excited for that.
Besides that, I'm a private person. I like my privacy. Probably find me, curled up in bed with some ice cream if you look hard enough. But I request that you don't.
All right, Malcolm, where can we find you?
You can find me on Take Food Productions, where I host a show similar to this, called Rankum. Our topic we're doing on Sunday is top 12 dogs in movies in honor of a movie I don't think anyone's really looking forward to see. It's Dog's Way Home, but
No.
but it's still coming out, so still doing something about it. But you can also find me on Full Metal and Multiplex, doing various things, trivia-related things over there. And you can also find me on Letterboxd, Stardust, and Twitter at Melkor.
All right, and if you guys enjoyed this, hit that like button. Subscribe to Film Nerd TV. If you are a pro wrestling fan, check out Combat Zone Wrestling Trivia. It is our wrestling trivia show that we do every week starting in February. The championship finals is going to be on January 27th. Last person standing as Nico Suave Rigoli takes on the dude Andrew Hayes. So check that one out. And also check out the Week of Wrestling podcast hosted by myself and Nico Suave Rigoli. Thank you guys, and we will see you guys soon. Peace.